The deep silence of space surrounded the outpost called Valora 9. Once it had been alive with voices, lights, and movement. Now only one human remained. His name was Daniel, and he was tired of the quiet. Every morning felt the same. He would wake to the sound of the ventilation system and the soft hum of machines struggling to stay alive. Most of the station's crew had left weeks ago after the mysterious attack that tore through their communication network. The evacuation ships had gone, leaving behind a single human engineer to maintain the systems and monitor the last signal sent to the stars. That engineer was Daniel. He sat inside the control chamber, staring at the screens that blinked weakly in front of him. Numbers scrolled, readings flickered, but none of it meant much anymore. He had already fixed every cable, replaced every fuse, and restored every damaged circuit he could reach. Still, no reply came from Earth or any nearby human fleet. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of power converters. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes and whispered to himself, "Still nothing. Guess that's normal now." He stood, stretched his arms, and walked to the viewing window. Outside, the dying red star glowed faintly, painting the surface of the station in a dark crimson hue. Pieces of old debris floated across the void. It reminded him of broken memories, fragments of the lives that had once filled this place. He pressed his hand against the cold glass and tried to remember what sunlight felt like. The thought hurt more than he wanted to admit. Then the silence broke. A faint tremor ran through the deck, followed by a long metallic groan. Daniel turned sharply toward the hallway. The lights above flickered. He grabbed his tool belt and flashlight, then stepped into the corridor. "Power fluctuation again?" he muttered, checking the small reader in his hand. But the readings were steady. Whatever caused that sound wasn't from the power grid. The hallway stretched ahead, long, dim, and filled with the echoes of his own footsteps. As he reached the junction leading to the maintenance sector, another sound followed, heavier, closer. It wasn't the groan of metal. It was the sound of footsteps. He froze. There was no one else here. No one had responded to his calls for days. The evacuation logs had shown that all other crew members, both human and alien, had left. He tightened his grip on the flashlight and whispered, "Who's there?" No answer came. The footsteps stopped. He took a cautious step forward, his flashlight beam cutting through the dust and shadow. The narrow corridor bent to the right, leading toward the hangar bay. His heart pounded louder with each step. Then from the dark corner a faint light glimmered, not from his flashlight but from something metallic reflecting it. He aimed the beam toward it and saw armor. A tall figure stepped out of the darkness, calm and silent. It was an alien, its armor covered in faint scratches and glowing insignia. The creature's posture was steady, its stance guarded but not hostile. Daniel took a step back, ready to run, but the alien raised one hand slowly, a gesture of peace. "You are human," the alien said in a firm but steady voice. "I did not expect any of your kind still here." Daniel swallowed hard, lowering his flashlight slightly. The alien was a Velaran, one of the species who had built this station centuries ago. Its skin was a soft pale green, its eyes bright gold. The face was calm with sharp but noble features. "Yeah," Daniel said carefully. "Guess I'm the last one." "And you are?" The alien placed a hand across its chest. "I am Sarah, guard of the Valoran outpost. My orders were to remain until relieved by command." Daniel frowned. "That was over 2 months ago. Command is gone. No one's coming back." Sarah looked around as if taking in the silence of the station for the first time. "Then this station is lost. Yet you remain." "I didn't have a choice," Daniel said with a faint smile. "They forgot me." There was a pause. The air between them felt heavy but not hostile. Sarah studied him, her golden eyes sharp yet thoughtful. "Then it seems we are both forgotten." A long silence followed. The hum of the dying power core echoed faintly through the floor. Daniel sighed. "I'm trying to keep the reactors from collapsing. If that goes, this place will become nothing but dust. You're welcome to help if you want." Sarah nodded once. "I will assist." Together they walked down the corridor toward the control room. Daniel could feel the alien's presence behind him, calm, disciplined, like a soldier who had walked through countless battles. The sound of her metal boots against the floor echoed softly with each step. When they reached the control chamber, Sarah stopped and examined the panels. "Your human systems are primitive but efficient." Daniel gave a dry chuckle. "Thanks. I'll take that as a compliment." She didn't respond, only began pressing controls with graceful precision. Within moments, several dormant defense modules flickered back to life. Daniel stared in surprise. How did you— The command codes of my people were built into this station, Sarah explained. I can still access them. The faint hum of machinery returned and the station's lights grew brighter. For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt something like relief. Then suddenly, an alarm rang through the room. A deep red light flashed across the panels. Sarah's expression turned serious. External sensors are detecting movement. Daniel ran to the console. Could it be one of our patrol ships? She shook her head slowly. No, the signature is not human or Velaran. It is unknown. Daniel leaned closer to the monitor. 3 shapes appeared on the radar. Fast-moving objects entering the outer orbit. His pulse quickened. Incoming ships? Unidentified, Sarah replied, her tone controlled but tense. Their approach vector is direct. They are not signaling for contact, he swallowed. Raiders. The word hung heavy in the air. Raiders were scavengers who hunted dead worlds, killing anyone they found. Daniel had heard stories. Entire stations stripped to nothing. Sarah moved to the weapons console. If that is true, we must prepare. You will stay near the inner corridor. I will guard the outer perimeter. He turned to her sharply. You're going out there alone? She met his gaze. I was trained for this. You are not, Daniel shook his head. You can't fight them by yourself. We need to lock down the station and set up traps. If they breach the hull, we fight together. Sarah's eyes narrowed. You would stand beside me? Unless you'd rather I hide and wait to die, he said with a half smile. She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. Very well, human, we stand together. They moved quickly. Daniel rerouted power to the internal turrets while Sarah reinforced the bulkheads with magnetic seals. The hum of machinery grew louder as systems came alive again, dust shaking off the metal like the station itself was waking up. As Daniel worked, he could feel the presence of something larger beyond the station, shadows in the void. The ships were closing fast. His screen flickered with warning signals. Impact in 4 minutes, he said quietly. Sarah stood at the viewport, her golden eyes fixed on the stars. Then 4 minutes to prepare our stand. Daniel swallowed and set the final lock on the reactor doors. His hands trembled slightly. For the first time in months, he wasn't afraid of being alone. He was afraid of losing the only ally he had found. He turned toward Sarah. Why are you still here? You could have left when your people abandoned the station. Her gaze stayed fixed on the stars. A guard's duty does not end because others flee. I was ordered to protect this place. I will fulfill that oath. He looked at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Then I'll make sure you're not doing it alone. The deck shuddered again. Warning lights filled the room. Daniel grabbed his rifle from the rack. Sarah activated her spear, its edge glowing with contained plasma energy. As the ship's shadow crossed the viewport, Daniel heard her voice, calm but strong. You are not alone, human, she said. I'll stand with you. The alarm screamed louder. The outer hull sensors flashed red. The first enemy craft locked onto the station's surface. Daniel took a deep breath, steadied his weapon, and glanced once more at Sarah. She stood tall, unwavering, a silent promise in her stance. And for the first time since the world had gone silent, Daniel felt a spark of hope. The sound of metal striking metal thundered through the corridor as the raiders began to breach the hull. The battle for Vellora 9 was about to begin. The first impact shook the floor like thunder. Daniel held his balance as warning lights flashed across the control room. The red glow painted everything in a dim hue that made the metal walls look alive. Outer hull breached, Sarah said, her voice calm but firm. Section T12 compromised. Daniel checked the readings. They've landed boarding pods, at least 3. Sarah turned toward him, her golden eyes sharp. Then they will try to reach the reactor. That is what raiders always want. Energy cores and data. Daniel nodded quickly. Then we stop them before they reach it. She pressed her hand against the console, activating the defense turrets. A deep mechanical sound echoed through the corridors as long dormant weapons came online. The automated turrets will hold them for a short time, she said. Not for long. Daniel grabbed his rifle and a small toolkit. We'll reinforce the inner hallway. If they break through, we'll funnel them in tight. Sarah looked at him once more, studying his human resolve. "You think like a soldier." He gave a small grin. "I think like someone who doesn't want to die." They moved together through the dim corridor. Sparks fell from broken light fixtures as pressure doors sealed one after another behind them. The station's old voice system crackled, repeating the same phrase. Warning. Hull integrity compromised. Daniel's boots echoed beside Sarah's metal steps. The air smelled faintly of ozone and burned metal. Somewhere deep within the outpost, distant explosions rang out, the turrets firing. When they reached the inner defense ring, Sarah took position near the first junction. She unfolded her plasma spear, its edge humming with energy. Daniel crouched near a control panel and began rerouting power to the shield barriers. "You fought before?" she asked suddenly, without turning her head. Daniel tightened a bolt with his wrench. "Once, during the frontier defense on Titan III. It didn't end well. We lost half the outpost." Sarah said nothing for a moment. Then quietly she replied, "Loss shapes strength. You fight better when you have known it." Before Daniel could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed through the metal hall. Heavy, fast, coming closer. He froze and looked up. Sarah raised her spear. "They are inside." The first raider appeared, tall, armored, and wearing a cracked mask. Its weapon glowed with a faint red light. Behind it, more figures moved in shadows. Sarah lunged forward with incredible speed. Her spear cut through the air and struck the raider's weapon, sending it spinning away. Daniel fired his rifle and a blue flash lit the corridor. The battle began. Sarah fought with the precision of a trained guard. Every strike was measured and strong. Daniel stayed behind cover, firing whenever he saw movement. The air filled with energy sparks and the sharp hiss of plasma discharges. One raider threw a grenade down the hallway. Daniel shouted, "Cover!" and pulled Sarah behind a barrier. The blast shook the walls, leaving smoke and fire across the floor. Sarah coughed once, her armor smoking, but she stood firm. "They test our defense," she said. "More will come." Daniel checked the sensors again. "They've breached 2 more sections. We can't hold every corridor." "Then we hold the core," Sarah replied. "Everything else is distraction." They moved again, retreating step by step through the narrow passageways. Every corridor was filled with floating dust and sparks. The once quiet station now roared with alarms and gunfire. As they reached the central passage to the reactor room, Sarah sealed the last bulkhead. Daniel placed a motion detector near the door. The device beeped 3 times before stabilizing. 5 hostiles approaching, Daniel said. Sarah planted her spear into the floor. "Let them come." The door burst open seconds later. 5 raiders stormed in, weapons blazing. Sarah moved like a blur, deflecting energy bolts with her spear's blade. Daniel's shot struck 2 of them before they could aim. A 3rd raider rushed Daniel, slamming him to the ground. He rolled aside as the attacker's blade struck the metal floor where he had been. Sarah's spear pierced the raider's chest in one motion. Daniel caught his breath. "Thanks." She helped him stand. "You fight with courage, human. Not many would face this." He smiled faintly. "Guess fear doesn't matter when you're already the last one left." Sarah's expression softened for a moment, almost like a faint hint of respect. "You are not the last while I stand here." Before Daniel could respond, the motion detector beeped again. More red dots appeared on the screen, many more. He frowned. "There's at least 20 now. They must have landed another ship." Sarah's grip on her spear tightened. "Then we fall back to the core room. It is easier to defend. The door there is reinforced titanium." They ran together down the final corridor. Behind them, distant shouts echoed through the halls. The raiders were relentless. Inside the core room, the air pulsed with blue light from the reactor sphere. Energy cables ran across the floor, humming with power. Daniel began sealing the doors while Sarah checked her weapon's charge. For a moment, the chaos outside faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of the reactor's heartbeat. Daniel sat near the console, his rifle resting beside him. "How many do you think are out there?" Sarah leaned against the wall, her armor scarred from the fight. "Too many to count." They are scavengers, not soldiers. They rely on numbers. Daniel looked at her. You've seen this before? She nodded slowly. On my homeworld, raiders came after the fall of our empire. They destroyed villages for energy and metal. We learned to fight without fear. Daniel's voice lowered. And you lost people you cared about. Sarah's eyes flickered, the golden light dim for a moment. Yes, everyone loses someone. It is what binds us. The room fell silent again. Only the hum of the reactor filled the air. Then the alarm sounded once more, a deeper tone this time. Daniel's monitor flashed. They're cutting through the outer door. Sarah stood straight, spear ready. Then this is where we stand. The first sparks appeared at the door's edge. The metal glowed red, then white. Within seconds, a circular hole melted through, and the first raider stepped in. Daniel fired immediately. The figure fell backward. More came through. The air filled with smoke and the sharp smell of burning metal. Sarah fought near the doorway, her movements smooth and powerful. Each strike knocked enemies aside, but more kept coming. Daniel felt the heat rising as he reloaded again and again. Sweat rolled down his neck. He fired until the rifle clicked empty, then reached for his sidearm. One raider broke past Sarah and charged at Daniel. He swung his tool bag, striking the raider's helmet and knocking it aside. Sarah's spear ended the fight in one clean motion. Stay behind me, she ordered. Daniel nodded, trying to steady his breath. Working on it. The battle raged for minutes that felt like hours. The room shook with every blast. Finally, as the last raider fell, silence returned. Only the sound of their heavy breathing remained. Daniel leaned against the wall, exhausted. That was too close. Sarah scanned the door. More will come. They never stop after one wave. Daniel walked to the console, typing quickly. Then maybe we can give them a surprise. She turned toward him. What do you mean? I can reroute the reactor's excess power through the corridor panels. When they enter next time, they'll get a welcome shock. Sarah raised an eyebrow. A dangerous idea, you could damage the core. Daniel smiled faintly. Then I guess it fits the situation. She hesitated, then nodded. Do it. He began working fast, hands flying across the console. Cables sparked as he connected old circuits to the energy lines. The reactor hummed louder, glowing brighter. When he finished, he looked up. It's ready. Next time they step inside, the floor will light up. Sarah stood at the doorway, watching the corridor. The silence outside felt unnatural now. Too still, too quiet. Daniel checked the monitor again. The red dots were moving slowly. They're regrouping, he said softly. Probably planning a bigger push. Sarah's expression was unreadable. Then we prepare as well. She moved closer to him, adjusting the controls on her armor. Human, she said after a pause. Why do you fight so hard for a place that is not yours? Daniel looked at her, then at the reactor's light. Because if I don't, this place dies. And if this place dies, everything we built together, humans and Velorans, disappears. I can't let that happen. Sarah studied him for a moment, her eyes reflecting the reactor's blue glow. Then she said quietly, Perhaps your kind's strength lies not in power but in the refusal to give up. He gave a tired smile. You're starting to sound like one of us. She looked away, but the faintest trace of a smile crossed her face. Then the detector beeped again. Faster this time, louder. Daniel's screen flashed red. They're charging in. Sarah gripped her spear, her voice calm. Then we end this wave together. The corridor outside filled with heavy footsteps. The raiders shouted in their harsh language. As they reached the threshold, Daniel hit the switch. The air inside Valora 9 was heavy with smoke. The sound of distant metal striking metal echoed through the silent halls. Daniel leaned against a console, catching his breath. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but exhaustion. Sarah stood near the door, her spear glowing faintly. The golden light from her eyes reflected off the walls. She looked calm, yet Daniel could tell she was preparing for what came next. They'll be back, Daniel said quietly. Yes, Sarah replied. They lost one wave, but raiders never leave unfinished work. Daniel checked the monitor again. The radar showed 3 new signals approaching the outer hull. More ships, he muttered. They're bringing reinforcements. Sarah didn't flinch. Then our test begins. Daniel turned toward her. You sound like you've been waiting for this. She tilted her head slightly. Every guard knows the day comes when she must prove her oath. This is mine. Daniel stared at her for a moment. And mine too, I guess. The red alert lights flickered again. The hum of the reactor grew louder, pulsing like a heartbeat through the floor. Daniel began checking the remaining power reserves. The systems were still stable, but the outer defenses were gone. They'll reach the core soon, Daniel said. We can't fight a full army in these halls. Sierra turned to him. You are thinking of surrender? He shook his head quickly. No, I'm thinking of buying time. She studied him for a long moment. Time for what? Maybe for someone to hear us, Daniel said. If we boost the signal beacon through the reactor's output, someone out there might pick it up. Sierra nodded slowly. You will handle the signal. I will hold the corridor. Daniel frowned. You can't fight them all alone. I can delay them, she said. That is enough. He stood still, uncertain. And if you fall? Her expression didn't change. Then I fall as a guard should. Daniel clenched his fists. No, we fight together. That was the deal. For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the machines. Then Sarah gave a slow nod. Together, then, they began preparing. Daniel connected power lines to the beacon tower, while Sarah reinforced the inner door with metal plating and emergency shields. Each minute felt longer than the last. The low vibration of enemy ships landing outside grew stronger. Finally, Daniel finished rerouting the circuits. Signal ready, he said. If this works, it'll send a burst strong enough to reach any listening post nearby. Sarah stood near the entrance, her spear drawn. Then do it. Daniel pressed the switch. The beacon lit up with a bright white glow, sending a wave of energy through the station. Static filled the air, followed by the faint echo of a transmission. This is Outpost Valora 9, Daniel said into the mic. We are under attack by raiders. Any Alliance vessel in range, please respond. Only silence followed. Sarah's voice came softly. Do not lose hope. The stars always answer in their own time. Before Daniel could speak again, the detector on the wall beeped sharply. The raiders were near. Sarah raised her spear. They are coming. The door shook under heavy blows. Metal bent inward, the sound filling the room like thunder. Daniel stepped beside Sarah, rifle in hand. His pulse quickened, but his grip was steady. The door burst open. Dozens of raiders poured through, their armor reflecting the blue light of the reactor. Sarah charged first. Her movements were swift and graceful, her spear cutting through the dark like lightning. Daniel fired his rifle beside her, every shot echoing through the chamber. The air filled with energy bolts and smoke. The reactor's light flashed across their faces as they fought side by side. Daniel reloaded quickly, ducking behind a console as a plasma blast struck the wall beside him. They're pushing hard, he shouted. Sarah struck another raider down and replied, Hold the line. The battle felt endless. Every step backward cost them ground, yet they refused to fall. Daniel's arms ached from the constant recoil of his rifle, and Sarah's armor showed new cracks from the blows she had deflected. Still, they fought. At one point, a raider threw a heavy projectile toward Daniel. Sarah leaped forward, blocking it with her spear. The blast knocked both of them to the floor. Daniel coughed, trying to breathe through the smoke. Sarah pushed herself up slowly, her voice calm even through pain. Are you hurt? I'm fine, he said, standing again. You? Her golden eyes glowed faintly. Still standing, another group of raiders entered the chamber. Daniel fired at them, driving them back. But the ammunition count was running low. We can't hold this forever, Daniel said between breaths. Sarah nodded. Then we find another way. Daniel looked around the room. His eyes stopped at the power conduit running along the wall. If we overload this section, it'll create a barrier of fire. It might block the next wave. Sarah's tone was cautious. You could damage the reactor. He wiped sweat from his forehead. If we don't, we're finished anyway. She gave a short nod. Do it. Daniel crossed the room, connecting 2 power couplers and pulling the emergency override. Sparks flew and a surge of energy ran through the walls. A sudden wave of heat filled the corridor as flames erupted, blocking the raiders' path. The explosion forced the enemy back, giving them a moment of silence. Sarah turned toward him, breathing hard. You continue to surprise me, human. He smiled faintly. I told you. I think like someone who doesn't want to die. She almost smiled in return, though her expression remained focused. Then we share the same thought. They moved to the side console again. The reactor temperature was climbing, but the signal beacon continued to transmit. Daniel hoped someone somewhere could hear it. Then a new sound broke through the static. A faint voice. This is Alliance Patrol Sigma. Repeat. This is Sigma. Receiving partial distress from Valora 9. Identify. Daniel's heart jumped. He grabbed the microphone. This is Daniel, last human engineer on Valora 9. We're under attack by raiders. We need immediate support! Static filled the channel, then silence. Sarah looked at him. Did they hear you? I don't know, he said. But at least someone's out there. Before they could say more, the outer blast door shuddered again. The fire barrier had burned out. The next wave was already at the gates. Sarah readied her spear once more. Her voice was calm. Then we fight again. Daniel reloaded his rifle, the last magazine clinking into place. Until they stopped coming. The door crashed open and another storm of enemies flooded in. Sarah met them head-on. Her movements were almost like a dance, swift, fluid, and precise. Daniel backed her up, firing between her strikes. Despite the chaos, something strange began to happen. They no longer needed to shout directions or plan. Every move flowed naturally, one covering the other. Sarah blocked attacks aimed at him, and he fired at those who slipped behind her. The noise was deafening, but neither faltered. Then, amid the smoke, a massive raider appeared, taller and heavier than the rest, carrying a heavy plasma launcher. It aimed directly at the reactor. Daniel's eyes widened. No! He fired again and again, but the creature kept advancing. Sarah threw her spear, striking the weapon's barrel. The launcher exploded, sending a wave of fire across the floor. The force knocked both of them down. Daniel's ears rang. His vision blurred. When he opened his eyes, the reactor chamber was covered in smoke. He saw Sarah lying nearby, motionless. He crawled toward her, coughing. Sarah, come on, stay with me. Her eyes opened slowly. I am here. He helped her sit up. Part of her armor was burned, revealing scorched metal beneath. You need rest, Daniel said. She shook her head. No time. The core is unstable now. He turned to the console. The reactor's energy output was spiking dangerously. That blast must have damaged the cooling unit. If it overheats, this whole place will go. Sarah stood, gripping her broken spear. Then what must we do? Daniel looked at the readings. There's a manual vent system in the reactor chamber. If we open it, it'll release the excess heat. But someone has to go inside to do it. Sarah didn't hesitate. I will go. No, Daniel said firmly. You're injured. I'll handle it. She met his gaze. You cannot survive the radiation. He took a deep breath. Then we find another way. They stared at each other in silence, both refusing to give up. Finally, Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. Human, I have seen many species fight for power. You fight for something else. That is why I believe you can endure this. Daniel shook his head. And I believe we both can. Before they could argue further, the detector beeped again. Another group was entering the station. Sarah's grip tightened on her broken spear. They never stop. Daniel looked at the reactor's rising heat levels. The situation was collapsing fast. If we don't act now, there won't be a station left to save. Sarah nodded once. Then we act. They moved together toward the reactor chamber, the blue light flickering across their faces. Smoke filled the air, alarms blaring louder than ever. As they reached the massive door, Daniel turned to her. Whatever happens, we finish this together. Sarah looked at him with steady eyes. Together. The heavy door opened and the core's blinding light spilled out. The heat was intense, waves of energy pulsing through the air. Inside the chamber, the heartbeat of Valora 9 thundered like a living thing. The real fight, for their survival and for the station's soul, was about to begin. The door to the reactor chamber slid open with a low metallic sound. A wave of heat rolled out, carrying the smell of burning circuits and ionized air. Daniel and Sarah stepped inside carefully. The room glowed with a harsh blue light. Streams of energy pulsed through the cables that ran from the central reactor sphere. It looked like a heart made of metal and lightning. The outer shell of the sphere cracked in several places, releasing bright flashes of light that filled the room with a steady pulse. Daniel wiped sweat from his face and looked at the control console on the left wall. The vent system is here, he said. But the manual override is fused. We'll have to reroute power from the stabilizers. Sarah studied the chamber. Her eyes scanned each walkway, each cable, as if memorizing every detail. Can it be done? Maybe, Daniel said, checking the circuits. But we need to activate both panels at the same time or it won't work. She turned toward him. Then we split, he hesitated. If something goes wrong, the energy surge will hit both sides. We won't get a second chance, Sarah's tone was steady. Then we do it right the first time. Daniel nodded slowly. All right, let's do this. They moved to opposite sides of the chamber. The sound of the reactor grew louder, its rhythm deep and powerful. Steam rose from the floor, wrapping the air in shimmering waves. The temperature kept climbing. Sarah placed her hand on the control plate. Ready. Daniel placed his on his own console. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, activate. Both panels lit up at once. Streams of data raced across the monitors as the system came online. The reactor's hum turned into a deep roar. The ground trembled under their feet. Daniel shouted over the noise, "Stabilizers are unlocking." Keep the current steady. Sarah's hands moved quickly, controlling the flow of energy. Her face stayed calm, but her skin glowed faintly under the bright light. The cables sparked as power shifted through the systems. Then one of the panels flickered red. A warning symbol flashed across Daniel's screen. We have a fault in the lower conduit. Sarah looked up. Manual repair? Yes, but it's inside the cooling shaft. Daniel replied. We'll need to open the access door. She turned toward the narrow hatch near the floor. I will handle it, he stepped forward. Wait, it's too dangerous in there. The radiation is rising fast, she didn't hesitate. Your human body cannot endure it. Mine can. Daniel clenched his jaw. You don't know that. Sarah looked at him, her voice calm but firm. You once said we stand together. That means one must act when the other cannot. Before he could stop her, she stepped into the narrow tunnel. The light inside was blinding. Daniel watched her silhouette move deeper into the glow until she disappeared behind the machinery. He returned to the panel and tried to control the current from his side. Sparks rained down from the ceiling. The temperature warning rose higher and higher. Sarah, talk to me, he said through the communicator. Her voice came back faint but steady. Almost there. The conduit is jammed. I see the blockage. Daniel tapped the console nervously. Careful. If that pipe ruptures, I know, she interrupted gently. Keep the current low. Seconds stretched like hours. Sweat dripped from Daniel's forehead. The reactor's pulse echoed in his chest. Then her voice returned, sharper now. It's done. The conduit is clear. The warning lights on his screen turned green. Power flow stabilized. Daniel exhaled in relief. Good work, Sarah. Get out of there. No reply came. Sarah? Static filled the line. Daniel's heart dropped. He grabbed his helmet and ran to the hatch. The heat coming from inside was unbearable. Sarah, he shouted again. Through the blinding light, he saw her crawling out, her armor scorched, her spear still clutched in one hand. She collapsed near the hatch opening, breathing heavily. Daniel rushed forward and helped her up. You're all right, he said quickly, though his voice shook. We did it, she looked up at him. Is the reactor stable? He nodded. For now. But the output's still rising. We bought time, not safety. Sarah steadied herself. Then we used that time wisely. Before Daniel could respond, the comms channel crackled again. A voice broke through the static. Faint, but human. This is Alliance Patrol Sigma. We received your signal. We are en route to Valora 9. Estimated arrival in 30 minutes. Daniel smiled weakly. Finally! Someone heard us. Sarah stood beside him, watching the light of the reactor reflect in his eyes. Then we must survive 30 more minutes. Daniel turned toward the door. The distant sound of explosions echoed through the halls. The raiders had reached the inner ring again. They're not giving up, he said. Sarah raised her damaged spear. Neither do we. They left the reactor chamber and sealed the door behind them. The corridor outside was filled with smoke and flickering lights. The station groaned under the stress of battle. Daniel reloaded his rifle while Sarah activated her armor's secondary shield. The two walked side by side down the corridor. The raiders appeared at the far end, dozens of them advancing through the smoke. Daniel took cover behind a fallen beam. Sarah stepped forward, her spear lighting up once more. The fight began again. Blasts of energy tore through the corridor. Sparks rained down. Daniel fired in short bursts, hitting one target after another. Sarah moved like a shadow, striking with precision and speed. Every time he looked up, she was there. cutting through the darkness like a blade of light, but there were too many. The enemy kept coming. Daniel shouted, "They're pushing us back." Sarah blocked a blast with her spear. "Then we fall back to the reactor room. It is the only strong point left." They moved together, covering each other as they retreated. The air filled with the sound of battle, the clang of metal, the hiss of plasma. When they reached the chamber door again, Daniel sealed it and locked the bolts. Sarah leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Her armor was cracked, her spear nearly broken. "They will breach soon," she said. Daniel checked the systems. "Then we end it before they can." She looked at him curiously. "End it how?" He pointed at the reactor control panel. "If we overload the core and direct the energy outward, it'll destroy the Raiders' ships in orbit. It'll also take out the station." Sarah stared at him. "You would destroy this place?" He met her gaze. "If we don't, they'll use the reactor to fuel their fleet. We can't let that happen." She was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Then we make it count." They began working quickly. Daniel adjusted the controls while Sarah rerouted the energy lines. The hum of the reactor grew louder until it filled every corner of the chamber. A timer appeared on the screen. 10 minutes until overload. Sarah stood beside him. "Will the Alliance ships arrive before this?" Daniel shook his head. "No, but they'll see the explosion. They'll know what happened here." She looked at him quietly. "You are willing to die for them?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Not for them. For what's right." For the first time since they met, Sarah smiled back. "Then you are more Valoran than you know." The chamber shook violently as the raiders began cutting through the door again. The sound of metal tearing filled the room. Sparks showered across the floor. Daniel looked at the timer. 7 minutes. Sarah placed her hand on his shoulder. "If this is our end, then I stand proud beside you." He turned toward her. "Same here." The door finally burst open. The raiders poured in, shouting in their harsh tongue. Sarah met them head-on, her spear glowing brighter than ever. Daniel fired from behind the console, hitting every target he could. The room became a storm of light and smoke. Each second felt endless. The timer reached 3 minutes. Sarah fought with every last bit of strength. Her armor was broken, her movement slower now, but her strikes never missed. Daniel's rifle clicked empty. He drew his sidearm and fired again. 2 minutes, he shouted. Sarah struck the last raider near the door, sending it crashing to the ground. She stumbled, falling to one knee. Daniel ran to her side. "It's done," he said. "They're all down." She looked up at him. "Then finish it." Daniel turned to the console and pressed the final override. The screen flashed red. The countdown began. Sarah stood slowly, watching the reactor glow brighter and brighter. "It is beautiful," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, it is." The hum of the reactor turned into a deep rumble. Light filled the room, spreading across the walls like a rising sun. He reached for Sarah's hand. She took it without hesitation. The final seconds ticked away. "Whatever happens," Daniel said quietly, "we did something that mattered." Sarah's golden eyes shone in the blinding light. Yes, together, the light engulfed them. The sound of the explosion rolled through the void, and Valora 9 vanished in a single wave of white fire. The first thing Daniel felt was silence. Not the silence of space, but a deep, peaceful quiet that filled his mind. He tried to open his eyes, but everything around him was white. For a moment he thought he was dead. Then he heard a faint mechanical beep, steady and calm. He blinked. The light faded, replaced by the soft glow of a ceiling lamp. His vision cleared slowly. He was lying on a bed, surrounded by medical equipment. The air was clean and the steady hum of engines vibrated through the walls. Daniel turned his head. The room was small, bright, and filled with the soft sound of machines. A holographic screen above his bed showed readings of his heart and oxygen levels. His uniform was gone, replaced by a medical gown. A voice spoke from the side. "You're awake!" Daniel turned and saw a young officer standing near the doorway. The officer wore the insignia of the Alliance Patrol, the same force he had called before the explosion. Daniel tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Where am I?" "You're aboard the patrol ship Sigma 1, the officer said. "We found you in a damaged escape pod near the remains of Valora 9. Daniel's mind struggled to keep up. "The station?" The officer's expression grew serious. "Gone, completely destroyed. The energy burst was visible for half a sector. It wiped out the Raider fleet instantly." Daniel's chest tightened. He remembered the final seconds, the light. Sarah's hand in his. He sat up quickly. The alien guard, Sarah, was she with me? The officer nodded toward the far corner of the room. Daniel turned and froze. Sarah was there, resting on another bed. Her armor was gone, replaced by a simple silver medical wrap. Her green skin looked pale, her eyes closed, but she was breathing. Daniel's voice softened. She made it. She did, the officer said. Barely. Her armor shielded you both from the main blast. We almost missed your pod in the debris field. Daniel leaned back, relief washing through him. Thank you, the officer gave a short nod. You both saved more lives than you can imagine. Command is already calling it the Valora Light event. They want to debrief you once you're stronger. When the officer left, Daniel sat quietly, staring at Sarah. The steady rhythm of her breathing filled the room. He remembered her words before the blast, together. Hours passed. Daniel's strength slowly returned. He tried to stand, but his legs were weak. He took a few steps toward Sarah's bed and sat beside her. You kept your promise, he said softly. You stood with me. Her eyes opened slowly. The golden glow returned, dim but alive. And you kept yours, she replied. Daniel smiled. We made it. Sarah looked around the room, her gaze calm. So this is an alliance ship. It smells like oil and metal. He laughed quietly. Yeah. Welcome back to human engineering. She studied him for a moment. You risked everything to save a world that was not yours. Daniel shook his head. It was ours. We fought for it together. For a while, neither spoke. Outside the window, distant stars glimmered against the darkness. Then Sarah asked softly, What happens now? Daniel looked out at the stars. We rebuild. The Alliance will learn what happened. Maybe they'll understand that humans and Bellerans are better together than apart. Sarah's gaze followed his. My people will not forget this. You showed them that humans do not abandon those who stand beside them. He looked back at her. And you showed me that loyalty still exists in this galaxy. They sat in silence again, listening to the steady hum of the ship. A few hours later, a group of officers entered the room. The lead officer, a tall woman with silver rank bars, stepped forward. Sergeant Daniel, guard Sarah. On behalf of the Galactic Alliance, I thank you both. Without your actions, the Raider fleet would have destroyed 3 more colonies. You saved thousands. Daniel stood straight, though his legs trembled slightly. We did what we had to, the officer nodded. Command has reviewed the data from the beacon. Your names will be recorded in the Valora Defense Archive. You will both receive the Star of Unity. Sarah tilted her head slightly. I do not fight for medals. Nor do I, Daniel added. The officer smiled faintly. Then wear it for those who cannot. When they were alone again, Sarah looked thoughtful. Humans honor courage differently. My people carve names into stone. You give symbols, Daniel smiled. Maybe both serve the same purpose. To remember. She nodded slowly. Then I will remember. Days passed aboard Sigma-1. Daniel recovered faster than expected. Sarah, though still weak, began walking again. The ship's crew watched her with quiet curiosity. Few had ever seen a Valoran before, especially one who fought beside a human. One evening, Daniel found her standing by the observation window. Looking at the stars, they're beautiful, he said. Stepping beside her, they are alive, she replied. Every light is a world, a story waiting to begin. Daniel folded his arms. Maybe this is one of those stories. Sarah turned her head slightly. You believe humans and Velerans can walk the same path? I do, he said. We just did. She was silent for a moment, then nodded. Then perhaps your kind will teach mine what unity truly means. The sound of footsteps approached behind them. The captain of Sigma-1 entered, carrying a small data pad. We've reached the nearest Alliance station, he said. Command wants to meet you both. They've arranged transport in the morning. Daniel nodded. Understood. After the captain left, Sarah looked out at the stars again. I never thought I would see peace again. Maybe peace isn't something we find, Daniel said quietly. Maybe it's something we build one stand at a time. Her golden eyes turned toward him. Then let us build it. The next morning, the two stood on the landing deck as the shuttle prepared to take them to the main Alliance headquarters. Soldiers and engineers lined the walkway, saluting them as they passed. Daniel felt uneasy under the attention. I'm not used to this, he muttered. Sarah glanced at him. Your people admire those who survive the impossible. Accept their respect. When they entered the shuttle, the engines roared to life. Through the window, The massive form of Sigma-1 faded into the distance. Ahead, a new world shimmered in the light of a nearby sun. Solara Prime, the Alliance capital. The shuttle landed in a wide courtyard filled with banners and lights. Officials and officers waited near the steps. Among them were representatives of many races, including several Velorans in ceremonial armor. As Daniel and Sarah stepped out, the crowd grew silent. The Alliance commander approached them, his voice deep and formal. Two warriors stood together when the galaxy turned its back. Their courage lit the void. Today we honor them. The commander handed each of them a small silver medal shaped like a star. Daniel accepted his quietly. Sarah examined hers, the medal reflecting the sunlight. Then, to everyone's surprise, she knelt slightly before Daniel and placed her medal in his hand. "This belongs to both of us," she said. Daniel shook his head. "No, you earned it," her expression softened. "We earned it." Applause filled the courtyard. Cameras flashed. For that single moment, no one saw a human or an alien. Only two survivors who refused to stand alone. That evening, Daniel stood on the balcony of the guest quarters, watching the city lights below. The air was warm, filled with the distant hum of ships moving through the sky. Sarah joined him quietly. She wore a new uniform, silver armor with the crest of the Alliance Guard engraved on the chest. "They offered me a place among their protectors," she said. "I accepted." Daniel smiled. "I'm not surprised. They'd be lucky to have you." She looked at him. "And you?" "I've been assigned to rebuild the communication network. They said they need someone who knows how to keep things running when everything falls apart." Sarah tilted her head. "That sounds like you." He chuckled softly. "Yeah, maybe it does." For a long time they stood together in silence, watching the stars rise. Sarah finally spoke. "When I first met you, I thought humans were reckless. You proved me wrong." Daniel turned toward her. "When I first met you, I thought Velorans were cold. You proved me wrong, too." Their eyes met, filled with quiet respect. Sarah extended her hand. "Then let us keep proving the galaxy wrong." Daniel shook her hand firmly. Together. Outside, the night sky shimmered with light. Among the stars, the wreckage of Vellora 9 drifted silently. Now a glowing field of crystal and metal, a monument to the battle that changed everything. Stories would spread across the Alliance about the human engineer and the alien guard who fought side by side against the void. Some would call it a miracle. Others would call it destiny. But Daniel and Sarah would remember it as something simpler. The moment two strangers stood together and refused to let darkness win.